Hey, Leslie, Kamani, Kamari. We started a new social studies unit, and I just wanted to catch you girls up on what we've been talking about. Our focus is on geography, and what we're starting with is talking about the state of Kansas. Now, I want you to think, here's the United States. This is the country that we live in, right? Duh, I guess I should share the screen, right? That would help. So here is the United States, right? The country that we live in. And in that country, right here, is the state of Kansas, right? Here's Nebraska, where I'm from. Here's Illinois, where my little brother and his wife live, and my little niece. And here's Massachusetts, where my other niece and her husband live. And here's Nebraska, where my mom and dad and my older brother live. And here's Kansas, where we all live, right? So that's our state. And what we're going to look at today is how Kansas is actually separated into two parts. One's eastern Kansas and the other's western Kansas. And so that's how they divide it up. And we're going to talk about how that's divided up today. And a few things to talk about first is, let me show you this vocabulary list. This is going to be important. We're going to look at a couple terms here, latitude and longitude. First of all, let's look at latitude. Look at these two globes here. And you see this line, this is called the equator. The equator is an imaginary line that it separates the earth into north and south, into two halves. They call them hemispheres. So you can see how this line, the equator, perfectly separates it into two halves, north and south. When you see all these other lines here, these lines measure how far north you're going of the equator or how far south you're going of the equator. And those are called latitude. Okay, if you look on our vocabulary list, it said latitude measures how far north or south of the equator a place is. Lines of latitude are called parallels. So these here are all called, these lines that are imaginary. Of course, you would not see them from space if you're looking at Earth. They're imaginary lines. These are called parallels, and they measure how far north or south you are from the equator. And if we look at this map, imagine, so you see these lines here, close up. Here's the 40th parallel of latitude, and you can see that's the border between Nebraska and Kansas. It separates them. Okay, so that's latitude. And then the other one is the lines that go this way. All right, and you have this line called the prime meridian, and it separates the Earth into these halves, east and west. So latitude, the equator, separated north and south. Prime meridian separates it into east and west. And then these lines here, these imaginary lines, they measure how far west you're going or east you're going of the prime meridian, or how west you're going of the prime meridian. And these lines are called longitude. These lines are called longitude. So if you look here, longitude measures how far east or west of the prime meridian a place is. Lines of longitude are called meridians. So these are all called meridians, these lines of longitude. So latitude lines called parallels, longitude lines called meridians. And if you look on this map, you can see the 100th meridian comes down and goes right through Kansas, and it's what separates Kansas into eastern Kansas and western Kansas. The 100th meridian separates that. So take a look at, in Seesaw, we have these two articles. Let me close this one. We have these two articles here. They say read Kansas. One's eastern Kansas, and the other one is western Kansas. All right. So I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to read these two articles to you, and I want you to figure out, why do they separate Kansas into eastern and western? What is the major difference between the two? That's what we want to talk about here. That's what I want you to think about. So eastern Kansas, here we go. Dividing east and west. Kansas can be divided into two regions based on physical traits. The 100th meridian roughly divides the state into two regions. There's the 100th meridian right there. Physical characteristics or physical traits are things like rivers, hills, forests, and plains. Rainfall also is a physical trait. The amount of rainfall is one of the major traits used to divide the state between east and west. So if we look at these graphics here, in eastern Kansas, they average like 40 inches of rain a year. In western Kansas, they average like 16 inches of rain a year. And that's really the main difference. One region gets a lot more rainfall than the other. So western Kansas is a lot drier place than eastern Kansas. But let's talk more about eastern Kansas. And they're talking about a difference in climate. And you saw that in our vocabulary page. I won't look at it. I mean, it's there, but let's not go back right now. Climate is what the weather's like in an area all year round. Like around here, our climate is we got hot, humid summers and cold winters, right? That's our climate. So the climate of the eastern region of the state has more than double the precipitation or rainfall of the western portion. So precipitation, that's a big fancy word for rain. So this region of Kansas gets a lot more rain than this region, more than double. So that's got to make these two regions very different from each other. And so here's an example of when there can be too much rain. This is Topeka way back in 1903. There's a big old flood. Look at all the water in the streets. You got too much rain. So let's look at what the physical features are like in eastern Kansas. So eastern Kansas has more vegetation, meaning more plants grow here. Vegetation, that means plants, trees, bushes, grass, things like that. So there's more vegetation in eastern Kansas. It has big trees and wooded areas. The land in eastern Kansas is known as the tall grass prairie. See this tall grass here? Rainfall helps plants grow. Rivers also provide water for plants. There are two major river systems in eastern Kansas, the Kansas River and the Arkansas River. So there's these two river systems. There's the Kansas River, and it's like 170 miles long, and it flows into the Missouri River. And then there's the Arkansas River, and it's a lot longer. It's 1,450 miles long, and it starts in Colorado and flows down into the Mississippi River. So there's two major river systems in eastern Kansas. And then let's talk about what resources we can find in eastern Kansas. Oil production is an important industry in Kansas. Many products are made from oil, including gasoline and plastics. And the first wells were drilled in eastern Kansas. So that's an example of an oil well there. So that's eastern Kansas. I read through it kind of quick. These articles are in Seesaw, so you can go and look at them whenever you want. We could see in eastern Kansas, there's Topeka, the capital, Manhattan, where Kansas State is, Wichita. I think that's the biggest city in Kansas. Hayes, Pittsburgh, these are all cities in eastern Kansas. So now that we've looked at that, let's look at the other region, western Kansas. All right. So remember, eastern Kansas, that was called the tall grass prairie. The western Kansas is called the high plains. So here we have the tall grass prairie in eastern Kansas, and here we have the high plains in western Kansas. The high plains is covered in short prairie grasses. This was buffalo country. A long time ago, millions of buffalo grazed on the rich prairie grasses. Indians relied on the buffalo for food, clothing, and shelter. So imagine around here, millions of buffalo a long time ago roaming around. A lot shorter grass. Makes sense, less rain, right? Probably shorter grass. The climate, western Kansas, is windy and dry. The climate is semi-arid. This means it has low annual rainfall, and short, coarse grass grows here. So this is a very dry place, windy, short grass. And this place, Dodge City, this pink box is telling us that Dodge City is like officially the windiest city in the United States. Averages 14 miles per hour of wind. And so here's a couple cities in western Kansas, Dodge City and Johnson City. And this is what it can get like when it's so dry. A lot of dust can kick up, like this huge dust storm from 1935. They called it Black Sunday because there was so much dust kicked up in a storm that it turned the sky black. In the 1930s, hot, dry conditions made the topsoil powdery dry. This killed plants and animals. Wind blew the dirt into black clouds that drifted across the plains. The dust in the air was so thick that the skies turned black. That'd be a scary thing to see, wouldn't it? So let's talk about the resources in western Kansas. Remember, main resource in eastern Kansas was oil. Let's see what the main business is here. Farming is the main business of western Kansas. The farms are large. Many are more than 1,000 acres in size. Farmers grow crops of wheat, sorghum, and corn. Corn needs more water to grow. For that reason, some of the land is irrigated. Underground water is used to irrigate farmland today. So yeah, I was wondering where they get water. There's not much rain here, but irrigate means to provide water for the crops. And it comes from underground, of all places. So, all right, like I said, I read through these two articles rather quickly, but you can always go back to them yourself. So what was the major difference between eastern Kansas and western Kansas? If you're listening, you would know that eastern Kansas gets more than twice as much rainfall every year than western Kansas. So western Kansas is a much drier place than eastern Kansas, all right? So we're going to be studying this a little bit more. Watch out for more videos as we learn more about Kansas. Really interesting place. And I want you to think about this question. Why is there so much less rainfall in western Kansas than eastern Kansas? Wonder what causes that, why there's so much less rainfall. So we'll be looking into that. All right, talk to you later.